I know, and we've got to talk more about it. And I think it's not just this country, it's all over the world. It's excruciating to live with past mistakes. It is so difficult. I always would like to change so many things in my past, but I can't. I've got to move forward. And it's very difficult to go back over them. It really is. It's because you just cringe. You just think, it's not me. Where was my head at the time that I did all these things, or I lapse of judgment, or whatever else I'm meant to have done? And it gets to a point where you really think, enough's enough. The girls are our life, and they're the blood in my veins. They are my everything. And, you know, one job I've done better than many people is I've been a good mother.
For years, Sarah Ferguson stayed completely silent about Prince Andrew. No matter how many scandals exploded around him, she kept defending him in public and tried hard to shield their daughters from the chaos surrounding the royal family. But now, that silence seems to be cracking wide open. Reports claim growing tension inside the York family has dragged old problems back into the spotlight again, and this time, the focus is landing directly on Andrew's role as both a husband and a father. People close to the situation reportedly believe the real issues started decades ago, long before Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie were even born. To really understand Andrew's relationship with his daughters today, many royal watchers say you have to go back to his marriage with Sarah Ferguson. What looked glamorous from the outside may have been struggling behind palace walls for years. The public saw fairy tale headlines, royal appearances, and smiling photo ops. But insiders now claim there was constant pressure building beneath the surface. Some even believe the emotional distance inside the marriage never truly disappeared and slowly affected the entire family dynamic over time. Andrew and Sarah tied the knot in 1986 at Westminster Abbey in one of the biggest royal weddings of the decade. Millions watched from around the world as crowds filled the streets and cameras captured every single moment. At first, they were painted as the fresh, exciting, modern royal couple who could bring new energy into the monarchy.
You know, who knows what the future will bring. I don't think there are many sort of men that could put up with this redhead. And also the world's press and scrutiny. They've got to be quite strong.
But behind closed doors, the reality was reportedly very different. Andrew's naval career constantly pulled him away for long stretches of time, leaving Sarah to deal with royal duties, harsh media attention, and eventually motherhood, mostly by herself. The pressure reportedly became overwhelming very quickly. Sarah later admitted in interviews that during the early years of their marriage, they actually spent very little time together. Even though they were one of the most famous couples in Britain, insiders say their day-to-day life often felt distant and disconnected. Across several years, the amount of time they physically spent together was surprisingly short. That meant Sarah often handled pregnancy, parenting, and intense royal expectations without steady emotional support from her husband. Imagine trying to adjust to one of the strictest and most heavily watched institutions in the world, while also raising young children largely alone.
I think that I am mum to two great girls, and the Queen is a most fantastic grandmother to the girls. But I am divorced from the family, so, you know, that's it. Most other families, you know, you're divorced. You're not invited to weddings and things like that.
Friends and people close to the family later described Sarah as isolated, emotionally drained, and struggling under enormous pressure during that period. The non-stop media scrutiny only made things worse, with tabloids constantly criticizing her appearance, behavior, and every public move she made. Now, looking back years later, many royal insiders believe the cracks inside Andrew and Sarah's marriage may have shaped far more than people realized at the time. Some believe those early struggles also influenced how Andrew later connected with Beatrice and Eugenie as they grew older. What once looked like a glamorous royal love story may actually have been filled with distance, frustration, and emotional strain from the very beginning. And according to growing speculation surrounding the York family, those same old patterns may still be affecting them even today. People close to Sarah Ferguson have claimed that despite living inside palaces, royal estates, and some of the most famous homes in Britain, she often felt completely alone behind closed doors. From the outside, the royal lifestyle looked glamorous and perfect. But insiders say the reality was much colder and emotionally exhausting than the public ever imagined. During the first years of their marriage, Andrew and Sarah reportedly spent only around 40 days a year together because of his naval duties. That shocking amount of distance happened during some of the biggest moments of Sarah's life, including pregnancy, childbirth, and raising two very young daughters. While trying to adjust to royal life, she was also dealing with nonstop media pressure and intense public attention with very little emotional support around her. Reports suggest the loneliness slowly started taking a serious toll on her mental and emotional well-being. Journalist Jenny Murray later recalled visiting Sarah at Buckingham Palace back in 1989 and being stunned by how isolated she appeared. According to Murray, the atmosphere inside the palace felt nothing like the glamorous royal image shown to the world. In fact, she even reportedly mistook Sarah for a staff member at first because everything seemed so quiet and disconnected behind the scenes. What stood out most to visitors and observers was how absent Andrew appeared from everyday family life during those years. Sarah was reportedly handling most of the parenting responsibilities on her own while also trying to survive relentless tabloid coverage and public criticism. Over time, the marriage slowly became defined more by distance than by partnership. There were not many explosive public arguments or dramatic confrontations, but insiders say there was a growing emotional separation that became impossible to ignore. Long stretches apart reportedly created a colder relationship inside the family, and many believe the damage built up quietly over several years. Years later, Andrew spoke publicly about happy memories with Beatrice and Eugenie, sharing stories about family moments and time spent together. But critics argue those moments represented only a small part of a much larger pattern of absence during their childhood. Some royal watchers believe the emotional distance during those early years left a lasting impact on the entire family dynamic and shaped relationships for decades afterward. By 1992, the marriage officially collapsed.
I'm very grateful to being in that position in a way when I hit rock bottom because of it woke me up.
Princess Beatrice was only 4 years old, while Eugenie was just 2. According to people close to the family, the emotional effects of the separation did not simply disappear once the marriage ended. Some insiders believe the strain and instability from those years continued affecting family relationships, long after Andrew and Sarah went their separate ways. Many believe the absence created during those early years became one of the defining issues inside the York family. And this is where the story starts becoming far more complicated than the public originally realized. Beatrice was born in 1988 and Eugenie followed in 1990. But by the time Eugenie was old enough to remember everyday family life, her parents were already separated. What the public saw as another royal breakup may have involved much deeper emotional struggles happening quietly behind palace walls for years. According to multiple reports and growing discussion around the York family, Andrew's role in his daughter's childhood was often tied more to official appearances and royal events than everyday parenting. He was seen at ceremonies, public outings, and major family occasions. But critics say he appeared far less involved in the normal routines that help create stability for children. There were reportedly very few regular school runs, quiet evenings at home, bedtime routines, or consistent day-to-day involvement. While the cameras captured royal smiles and formal appearances, insiders claim much of the real parenting responsibility was happening behind the scenes without him there full-time. A huge amount of that responsibility reportedly fell directly on Sarah Ferguson. Even while facing nonstop media criticism, harsh tabloid headlines, and pressure from royal life, Fergie was often described as the steady and emotionally present parent raising Beatrice and Eugenie. People close to the family frequently called her the emotional center of the household, saying she worked hard to keep life as normal and supportive as possible for the girls, despite constant public scrutiny. As adults, both sisters have openly spoken about how important their mother was during some of the hardest moments in their lives.
But we're not at all peers. But the thing about life is that we are old players, aren't we? All of us. We've been out there. How many years have you been?
Princess Eugenie, for example, publicly discussed dealing with scoliosis as a child and undergoing major surgery at just 12 years old. She explained that it was her mother who first noticed the condition and made sure she received the care and confidence she needed afterward. Eugenie has spoken emotionally about how Sarah supported her through recovery and helped her feel comfortable about the scars left behind after surgery. Many people watching those interviews noticed one detail almost immediately. Andrew was barely mentioned at all during the story. That detail stood out to many royal observers and critics. The focus remained completely centered on Sarah's support, presence, and encouragement during one of the most difficult experiences of Eugenie's childhood. To many people, it reinforced the growing belief that Sarah was the parent handling most of the emotional weight inside the family, while Andrew stayed more distant from everyday struggles and responsibilities. Princess Beatrice shared something very similar in 2024 while speaking publicly about her mother's cancer recovery. She described Sarah as resilient, incredibly strong, and one of the biggest inspirations in her entire life. Beatrice praised the way her mother handled difficult situations with determination and positivity. And once again, people noticed the same pattern appearing in public comments about the family. The emotional praise and gratitude almost always seemed directed toward Sarah Ferguson. Over the years, many royal watchers began pointing out how consistent that pattern became. Whenever Beatrice and Eugenie talked about emotional support, family stability, difficult experiences, or personal struggles, Sarah Ferguson was almost always placed at the center of the story. Critics of Andrew argue that this repeated absence in those conversations speaks volumes by itself. Even without direct criticism, they believe the silence surrounding Andrew's role says just as much as the praise being given to Sarah. As Beatrice and Eugenie grew older, more people continued noticing the same dynamic. When the sisters spoke warmly about family support, encouragement, and guidance, the recognition almost always went to their mother, rather than Prince Andrew.
What more can I say?
The biggest.
You can't possibly, of course it has.
Andrew still carried the royal title, attended public appearances, and maintained an official position within the monarchy for many years. But according to critics, Sarah was the one managing most of the real responsibilities at home and providing the emotional foundation that held the family together. Sarah Ferguson reportedly became the person holding everything together inside the household. While public pressure around the royal family kept growing year after year, she was the one managing daily life, supporting Beatrice and Eugenie through difficult moments, and trying to maintain stability during periods filled with scrutiny and non-stop tabloid attention. Friends close to the family often describe Sarah as the emotionally available parent, especially during stressful periods when the family faced public criticism. Over time, many royal observers began noticing the major difference between simply being physically present and being emotionally present in a child's life. But the situation surrounding Prince Andrew eventually became far more serious because of his long-known friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew first reportedly met Epstein in 1999 while moving through elite international social circles filled with wealthy and influential figures. Epstein was already known for his powerful connections and luxurious lifestyle, and over time, Andrew became increasingly linked to that world. For years, the friendship drew attention, but the major turning point came in 2008 when Epstein pleaded guilty to charges involving the exploitation of a minor in Florida. After Epstein's conviction became public, many well-known public figures quickly distanced themselves from him in order to avoid backlash and controversy. Andrew, however, faced heavy criticism because he continued maintaining contact afterward. The controversy exploded even further when he was photographed visiting Epstein's New York home in 2010, years after the conviction had already become widely known to the public. That decision triggered enormous criticism across Britain and beyond, with many people questioning why a senior royal would continue associating with someone carrying such serious criminal allegations and legal history. The backlash caused major damage to Andrew's public image and created growing pressure inside the royal family itself. Critics argued that his decisions were no longer just personal mistakes because they were now affecting the reputation of the monarchy as a whole. Palace officials reportedly became increasingly concerned about how the scandal was reflecting on the institution, especially as public anger and media attention intensified. What once seemed like controversial headlines slowly turned into one of the biggest royal public relations disasters in modern history. What made the entire situation even more uncomfortable for the royal family was the way Andrew's social life reportedly overlapped with family matters. According to reports that surfaced later, correspondence connected to Epstein allegedly included references and photographs involving Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie while they were still young. There is absolutely no suggestion that either sister was involved in wrongdoing themselves, and no evidence has indicated they participated in any improper activity. However, critics argued the reports highlighted how closely Andrew's controversial social world had begun colliding with his role as a father and senior royal figure. For many observers, this became the moment when concerns surrounding Andrew stopped being viewed as only private or personal issues. Instead, people began seeing the controversy as a direct threat to the image and credibility of the monarchy itself. Critics argued that the lines between Andrew's private social connections and his public responsibilities had become dangerously blurred over the years. There is no indication that Beatrice or Eugenie were aware of Andrew's controversial associations while growing up. Still, critics claim his choices placed the family under enormous public scrutiny and created uncomfortable questions that followed the monarchy for years afterward. Reports over time suggested that people connected to Epstein's wider network moved within social circles that overlapped with Andrew's royal connections, which only fueled more public concern and media attention surrounding the scandal. Some controversial figures were reportedly present around private gatherings, social events, and celebrations connected to the York family over the years. Because of Prince Andrew's associations, moments that should have stayed personal for Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie slowly became tangled up in public controversy. Royal watchers and critics began raising more questions about the kinds of wealthy and influential people Andrew surrounded himself with, especially after several of those individuals later faced serious scrutiny or damaging allegations of their own. Expensive gifts, luxury invitations, private trips, and elite social connections only added more concern about Andrew's judgment and the people he allowed into his orbit. Critics argued that the growing pattern reflected poorly on the royal family and created unnecessary risk for those closest to him. Beatrice and Eugenie had no control over their father's friendships or private associations, yet they were still forced to deal with the intense public fallout years later as more headlines continued surfacing. Many royal observers believe the sisters were unfairly dragged into controversies they never asked to be connected to in the first place. As additional Epstein-related documents and reports became public, sources claimed Beatrice and Eugenie were shocked and deeply distressed by some of the information emerging in the media. Although both sisters remained mostly silent publicly, people close to the family reportedly described the entire situation as emotionally devastating behind closed doors. The pressure surrounding the York family reportedly became even heavier as public criticism intensified and media coverage exploded around the world. Everything escalated dramatically in November 2019 when Andrew agreed to the now infamous BBC Newsnight interview with journalist Emily Maitlis. The interview was reportedly intended to repair his damaged reputation and explain his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein to the public. Palace insiders allegedly hoped the appearance would calm the controversy and help Andrew regain some credibility after months of backlash. Instead, the interview quickly turned into one of the biggest royal public relations disasters in modern history.
Which is kind of brave to say, but it's true. And I really am proud of that.
It's a lovely thing to say.
And I think that the girls will shine more and more. And the more they shine, the more everyone will say, she can't be that bad.
During the broadcast, Andrew denied wrongdoing and rejected allegations made by Virginia Giuffre, who accused him of sexually abusing her when she was a minor. He also stated that he had no memory of ever meeting her. Several explanations he gave during the interview were immediately met with widespread criticism and disbelief from the public, the media, and even some royal commentators. One of the most discussed moments involved his comments about a medical condition that he claimed affected his ability to sweat, which quickly became heavily mocked online and across television coverage. But the moment many people remember most involved the alibi Andrew provided during the interview. He claimed he had been with Princess Beatrice at a Pizza Express restaurant in Woking on one of the dates connected to the allegations. That statement instantly dragged Beatrice into a global scandal she had never chosen to be part of, and it sparked enormous public discussion almost overnight. Suddenly, what was supposed to be a defense of Andrew also placed his daughter directly into headlines connected to one of the monarchy's most damaging controversies. Public reaction to the interview was absolutely brutal. Media outlets across Britain and internationally described the appearance as disastrous, uncomfortable, and deeply damaging to the royal family's image. Instead of calming criticism, the interview intensified public outrage and increased pressure on Buckingham Palace to distance itself from Andrew completely. For many royal observers, this marked the moment the scandal became impossible for the monarchy to contain quietly behind palace walls. Media criticism exploded almost immediately after the interview aired. Sponsors and organizations quickly started distancing themselves from Prince Andrew, while public pressure on the royal family intensified day by day. Within only a few days, Andrew officially stepped back from royal duties as backlash continued growing across Britain and internationally. Over time, he lost military titles, royal patronages, and most of his remaining public role inside the monarchy. What had once been a powerful royal position suddenly collapsed under the weight of nonstop controversy and public outrage. For Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, the damage became deeply personal. Their father's attempt to defend himself had instead dragged the York family name into worldwide scandal in a way they could not escape. Every headline, interview clip, and public debate surrounding Andrew also placed intense attention on the rest of the family. Royal insiders claimed the sisters were left trying to protect their own lives and reputations, while the controversy around their father continued dominating international news coverage. As the Epstein scandal kept growing, old family events and public appearances connected to the York family suddenly started being viewed through a completely different lens. Photos, celebrations, vacations, and past royal moments that once seemed harmless were now being re-examined by the media and online commentators. Personal memories became tied to public controversy, creating enormous emotional pressure for Beatrice and Eugenie behind closed doors. Reports at the time suggested both sisters were emotionally overwhelmed while still trying to maintain the calm and controlled image expected from members of the royal family. Privately, they were reportedly dealing with the fallout mostly alongside their partners, Sarah Ferguson, and a small circle of close relatives and trusted friends. What made the situation especially painful for many people watching was that the controversy came from decisions the sisters never made themselves. Beatrice and Eugenie did not choose their father's friendships, social connections, or the controversial people who entered his world over the years. Yet despite that, they still became linked to the public backlash simply because of their family name. Once Andrew became publicly connected to Jeffrey Epstein, the York family was pulled into intense global scrutiny that seemed impossible to avoid. Many royal observers noticed that two patterns critics had discussed for years suddenly collided all at once: emotional distance inside his family life and questionable judgment in some of his outside relationships. For Beatrice and Eugenie, the result was long-term damage to their public image despite having no direct involvement in the scandal themselves. That reality reportedly created enormous frustration and emotional strain inside the family. Since then, both sisters have mostly maintained lower public profiles compared to several other senior royals. Instead of constantly stepping into major royal drama, they have focused more on work, marriage, charitable projects, and family life. Public appearances became more selective, and many people noticed they often seemed determined to protect their private lives from additional controversy and media attention. When Beatrice and Eugenie do speak publicly now, they frequently emphasize stability, resilience, loyalty, and close personal relationships. Those themes appear again and again whenever they discuss family and personal values. And according to growing speculation surrounding the York family, this may be one of the biggest reasons Sarah Ferguson has reportedly started changing the way she speaks about Prince Andrew in recent years. Some royal watchers believe her tone has become noticeably more careful, more reflective, and far less defensive than it once was. For years, Sarah Ferguson stood firmly by Prince Andrew no matter how damaging the headlines became. Through television interviews, magazine features, public appearances, and charity events, she consistently defended him and described him as both a good father and a misunderstood man. Even while criticism around Andrew kept growing, Fergie rarely appeared willing to publicly distance herself from him. That message stayed remarkably consistent for years, despite scandal after scandal surrounding the York family. But as the controversies deepened, royal titles disappeared, and investigations brought even more pressure onto the monarchy, people slowly began noticing subtle changes in Sarah's tone. The difference was not dramatic at first. There was no huge televised confrontation or explosive public statement attacking Andrew. Instead, the shift appeared gradually through smaller moments. Pauses during interviews, careful wording, and noticeable situations where she no longer defended him as strongly or as emotionally as she once had. Royal observers and commentators now believe Ferguson may have quietly reached a personal breaking point after spending decades trying to protect both Andrew and the wider York family from complete public collapse. According to insiders, years of pressure, scandal, and emotional exhaustion may have finally started changing how she views the situation behind closed doors. Some reports even suggest tensions inside the family have become increasingly difficult to hide as public scrutiny continues following Andrew everywhere he goes. And according to growing speculation from royal insiders, what Sarah Ferguson may choose to reveal in the future could create even more tension inside the royal family. Over time, people began noticing a very important detail in many of her interviews and public appearances. Little by little, she appeared to stop including Andrew in the emotional picture she painted of family life. That change became especially noticeable after Andrew publicly used Princess Beatrice as part of his defense during the Epstein controversy. For many royal watchers, that moment felt like a major turning point inside the family dynamic. Critics argued that mentioning Beatrice during the interview unintentionally dragged her deeper into a scandal she never chose to be connected to. Afterward, when Ferguson later spoke publicly about some of the hardest periods of her own life, including cancer treatment and recovery, her focus stayed almost entirely on her daughters rather than Andrew. Again and again, Sarah described Beatrice and Eugenie as the people who helped carry her through fear, uncertainty, and difficult health challenges. She spoke emotionally about their support and the close bond the three of them share. At one point, she even gave that relationship a specific name, calling them a tripod. Sarah, Beatrice, and Eugenie, all supporting each other through life's hardest moments together. What stood out immediately to many observers was the obvious symbolism behind that description. A tripod has 3 legs, not 4. Andrew was completely missing from the emotional image Sarah carefully created during those interviews.
You're out of it. And so, it's very hard for me because I long to be with the girls in their finery and looking lovely, and I long to be part of it all, to be with the girls. But you cannot have your cake and eat it.
For royal commentators, that detail spoke volumes without her needing to directly criticize him. Throughout 2024, Ferguson repeatedly praised her daughters for being loyal, emotionally supportive, dependable, and strong during her health battle. Interview after interview, she highlighted how much Beatrice and Eugenie meant to her recovery and emotional well-being. Meanwhile, Andrew's name was mentioned far less often than people had become used to hearing in previous years. One of the clearest examples came when Princess Beatrice appeared on This Morning in 2024 to discuss her mother's recovery. The conversation centered heavily around Sarah's resilience and the powerful support system between mother and daughters, once again reinforcing the same pattern many royal watchers had already started noticing. More and more, the emotional core of the York family seemed to revolve around Sarah, Beatrice, and Eugenie, while Andrew appeared increasingly absent from the story being publicly told. Princess Beatrice spoke warmly and emotionally about Sarah Ferguson during the interview, praising her as strong, inspiring, and incredibly resilient through difficult health struggles. She highlighted her mother's determination, positivity, and ability to stay emotionally supportive even during painful moments. But what many royal watchers noticed immediately was something else entirely. Throughout the entire conversation, Prince Andrew was never mentioned even once. For many observers, that silence carried more weight than any direct criticism ever could. After spending decades publicly defending Andrew through scandals and controversy, Sarah Ferguson now appeared to be emotionally separating herself from him in quiet but increasingly noticeable ways. Instead of presenting a united image with Andrew, more of her public focus centered on her daughters, family support, and personal resilience. Royal commentators began pointing out that the emotional picture she now described looked very different from the one she promoted years earlier. According to sources close to the York family, things reportedly became even darker after Andrew's legal controversies and public scandals intensified. Reports claimed Ferguson was deeply shaken by the fallout surrounding the Epstein-related documents and the growing scrutiny aimed directly at the York family. Every new headline reportedly added more pressure behind palace walls, while public criticism continued growing internationally. At the same time, Sarah's own world was reportedly changing rapidly. Her charity work faced setbacks. Public criticism around the York family increased again, and there were reports suggesting uncertainty surrounding Royal Lodge and her long-term security within royal life. The public image she had spent years rebuilding, resilient, loyal, and untouchable, suddenly appeared fragile once more. After working for decades to repair her reputation following earlier royal scandals, many observers believe the renewed controversy surrounding Andrew placed enormous emotional strain on her personal and public life. According to reports, Ferguson also began spending long periods away from the United Kingdom, including stays in Austria, France, and the UAE. Some royal insiders suggested the travel gave her distance from the non-stop media attention and pressure surrounding the family. Others speculated it reflected growing tension behind the scenes as the monarchy continued dealing with fallout connected to Andrew's reputation. Meanwhile, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie continued trying to maintain as much stability as possible. The sisters attended royal events selectively, focused on raising their children, supported charitable causes, and largely avoided speaking publicly about either parent. Many royal observers now view Beatrice and Eugenie as women who spent most of their lives quietly dealing with consequences created by decisions they never personally made themselves. Despite years of controversy surrounding their father, both sisters have continued trying to preserve calm, privacy, and normal family life away from constant scandal. And according to growing speculation inside royal circles, the emotional impact Andrew's controversies had on his daughters may be far deeper than the public fully understands. By early 2026, reports suggested the distance between Prince Andrew and his daughters was no longer subtle or hidden behind carefully managed public appearances. Instead, it was reportedly becoming impossible to ignore. In January, several media outlets claimed Princess Eugenie had stopped speaking to her father completely. Reports suggested she did not visit him during Christmas and intentionally chose to remain separate during a period normally centered around family gatherings and royal traditions. The situation reportedly drew major attention because royal holidays are usually viewed as carefully protected family occasions. The story was even discussed publicly on Good Morning Britain, where commentators noted that Eugenie's absence appeared deliberate rather than accidental. Royal analysts suggested the reported decision reflected more than temporary personal emotion or scheduling conflicts. To many observers, it signaled just how serious the emotional strain inside the York family may have become after years of scandal, pressure, and public fallout surrounding Prince Andrew. Many royal observers believe Princess Eugenie's reported decision may have been about protecting her own values, reputation, and immediate family from the ongoing controversy connected to Prince Andrew. For someone raised under constant public scrutiny, every public appearance and every visible family connection carries enormous meaning. Royal analysts often point out that standing beside someone publicly inside the monarchy is never viewed as a small gesture, especially during periods of scandal and intense media attention. Princess Beatrice appeared to approach the situation somewhat differently. Reports suggested she maintained limited contact with Andrew and even invited him to attend her daughter's christening in late 2025. But even that support reportedly came with very clear boundaries. There were no major public photographs released afterward, no visible joint appearances, and no public statements presenting a strong show of solidarity. To many observers, it looked more like a quiet acknowledgement of family ties rather than a full public defense of her father. Royal commentators described the situation as extremely careful and tightly controlled. Beatrice appeared determined to maintain some level of personal family connection, while also avoiding actions that could pull her deeper into public controversy. That balancing act reportedly became harder and harder as scrutiny surrounding Andrew continued following the York family everywhere they went. Then the pressure intensified once again in February 2026, when reports emerged claiming Andrew faced additional legal scrutiny connected to past associations. The headlines immediately reignited international attention around the York family, sending another wave of media focus directly toward Beatrice and Eugenie. Once again, both sisters stayed completely silent publicly despite enormous speculation surrounding the situation. That silence quickly became one of the biggest talking points among royal watchers and commentators. Many people believe the sisters were deliberately trying to protect their husbands, children, and personal lives while distancing themselves from scandals they never personally created. After spending years caught in the middle of controversies connected to their father, some observers argue Beatrice and Eugenie may have finally decided that staying silent was the safest and smartest option available to them. For years, the sisters had continued standing beside Andrew through one controversy after another, even while public criticism around him kept growing. But by 2026, many royal insiders believed the relationship inside the York family had changed dramatically behind closed doors. The carefully managed image of family unity that once existed no longer seemed nearly as convincing to the public. According to growing speculation inside royal circles, the emotional divide within the York family may now be impossible to fully repair. Years of scandal, media pressure, public humiliation, and emotional strain reportedly created fractures that became deeper over time rather than healing. Some royal analysts believe the damage done to family relationships during the Epstein controversy may continue affecting the Yorks privately for many years to come. After the latest wave of headlines surrounding Prince Andrew, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie remained completely silent once again. There were no televised defenses, no emotional interviews, and no attempts to publicly explain or justify the situation. Instead, reports suggested both sisters quietly stepped back from public attention while appearances, schedules, and future plans were reportedly being reconsidered behind the scenes. To many royal observers, the silence itself became the loudest statement of all. The absence of public support, combined with increasingly careful distance, fueled even more speculation that the emotional separation inside the York family had become far more serious than the monarchy ever intended the public to see. Sources close to the York family describe both Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie as deeply shaken by everything unfolding behind the scenes. According to reports, the concern was not only about the information already made public, but also about what else could still emerge in future headlines and investigations. That constant uncertainty reportedly created enormous emotional pressure for both sisters as they tried to protect their families and maintain some sense of normal life away from the spotlight. The fallout soon started affecting their public lives in visible ways as well. One of the biggest examples came through reports claiming the sisters were excluded from Royal Ascot in 2026 because of the growing controversy surrounding the York family. For many royal observers, that moment carried major symbolic weight. Royal Ascot has always been strongly connected to royal tradition, public image, and visibility within the monarchy. Being reportedly distanced from such an important royal event sent a powerful message about how serious the situation surrounding Andrew had become. For Beatrice and Eugenie, the situation reportedly felt especially unfair because they had spent years building careers, marriages, charitable work, and independent lives outside of their father's controversies. Yet despite all of that, public perception continued linking them back to Prince Andrew and the scandals surrounding him. Many commentators believe that may be one of the hardest parts of carrying the York name today. The sisters did not create the controversy, but they still live with the consequences every single day. Now their biggest challenge appears to be figuring out how to move forward while balancing family loyalty, public pressure, royal expectations, and their own personal identities. For years, they stood quietly beside the York family through crisis after crisis, trying to maintain stability while controversy exploded around them. But by 2026, many royal insiders believe the damage connected to Andrew's choices changed the family permanently. What once looked like a united royal household now appears far more complicated behind closed doors. And honestly, this entire story raises huge questions about loyalty, family pressure, and the cost of public scandal inside the monarchy. How much responsibility should family members carry for controversies they did not personally create? And how do people move forward when their last name keeps pulling them back into headlines they never asked for? So what do you think about everything that happened here? Does this story change the way you see Prince Andrew and the York family? And which part of this entire situation shocked or surprised you the most? Let me know down in the comments because I really want to hear your thoughts on this one. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the latest royal drama and hidden tensions inside the monarchy, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with anyone following the royal family story. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates, breaking royal news, and major developments. And before you leave, check out the next video on your screen because there is still a lot more royal drama waiting to be uncovered.